Today, we're diving into the world of the sun bear, the smallest bear on the planet. But this isn't going to be some story from the deep rainforests of Southeast Asia. Nope, this story is written on the concrete floor of a cage, told through the everyday actions of two bears. So let's see what they have to teach us. Meet Utu. Now, what might just look like his daily routine, it's actually a whole lot more. It's like a collection of clues. You see, every single thing he does, from the way he moves to what he eats, it tells us something really important about what his entire species needs out there in the wild. All right, so to really get what's going on with you two, we kind of have to zoom out for a second and look at the bigger picture. We need to talk about sun bears as a whole, because honestly, as a species, they are living right on the edge. So the official folks who track this stuff, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, you'll hear them called the IUCN, they've classified sun bears as vulnerable. Now, that's not just some fancy label. It's a real scientific red flag. It means their numbers are dropping, and fast, pushing them closer and closer to just disappearing. So what's pushing them to the brink? Well, it's a list that's sadly pretty familiar. For starters, their forest homes, they're being bulldozed for timber. They're also being illegally hunted for their body parts, especially their bile for traditional medicine. And as you'd expect, as their world gets smaller and smaller, they end up in more conflicts with people. Okay, so let's shift gears. We're going from the dangers out in the wild to one very specific spot, a transit cage. This is at the Natural Resources Conservation Agency, also known as BKSDA, over in central Kalimantan, Indonesia. And this is where a team of researchers sat down and just watched two bears, trying to figure out what their behavior in a cage could tell us about their lives. And here they are, the two bears at the center of our story. We've got Siwa, who's a little bit smaller, and Uta, the guy we met just a minute ago. They're both adult males, about 12 years old. And even though they share a space, you're about to see they tell two very different stories. Now, this is where things get really, really interesting. Just look at the difference here. Out in the wild, a male sun bear has a home range of up to 25 square kilometers. Think about that. They can walk up to 8 kilometers in a single day just looking for food. But in here, their entire world is just a few square meters. And dinner? Well, that just shows up on a schedule. Understanding this massive contrast it's absolutely crucial for everything else we're about to uncover. So the researchers, they watched these two bears like hawks, writing down every single thing they did. And they weren't just watching animals pace in a cage. No, they were gathering clues. They were basically decoding a secret language of behavior to figure out what these bears truly need. And wow, this chart really shows what they found. I mean, just look at this breakdown. A huge 58% of their time, 58% is spent on what's called locomotion and object play, basically just moving around and messing with stuff in their cage. That's more than grooming, eating, and sleeping combined. 58%. Just let that number sink in for a second. More than half of their entire day is spent just moving. And that brings up a really important question, right? For an animal that's built to roam for miles and miles every single day, what does locomotion actually mean when you're stuck in a tiny metal cage? Well, it means pacing. It means walking in endless circles. It's a powerful, wild instinct with absolutely nowhere to go. But that big 58% number, it only tells us part of the story. Things get really fascinating when we break it down and look at Stiwa and Udu as individuals. That's when we start seeing these incredible differences in how each one is coping. Okay, check out this table. I mean, right away, you see some massive differences. Uta spends nearly 3 times as long eating as Siwa does. And get this, Siwa spends almost 8 times longer grooming himself than Uta. Why? I mean, these aren't just random numbers. They're puzzles, and they tell us so much about what these individual animals need. All right, let's solve that feeding mystery first. So Siwa, he just gobbles down all his food in one go. But Uta, he's different. He often leaves his fruit and then comes back for it later. And that seems weird, right? I mean, Uta's the bigger bear. You'd think he'd be the one eating more urgently. And here's the answer straight from the research paper. It turns out, before they get their fruit, they're given milk. And Uta, he drinks a lot of his milk, which kind of fills him up. Siwa, not so much. So the key here is that Uta's feeding time is higher, not because he's hungrier, but because he's basically snacking all day after his milk appetizer. Okay, so what about the grooming mystery? Remember, 26% of Siwa's day is spent grooming, compared to just 3% for Utu. That is a huge difference. So is Siwa just a tidier bear, or is there something else going on here? You are not going to believe the answer to this one. It's incredible. Siwa has a unique physical trait. His tongue is kind of split in two. So when he drinks his milk, he's a really messy drinker. He spills it all over his fur, which means he has to spend a ton of time cleaning himself off. Now, this isn't just some fun fact. It's a perfect example of why individualized care is so important. So after all this detailed observation, you might be asking, what's the point? Well, it's not just about understanding these two bears. It's about building a solid case for how to save their entire species. All these findings from inside the cage, they become a direct proposal for survival in the wild. Let's go back to that number one behavior, that constant pacing. That 58%, it's not just a sign of stress. It is, and I love this phrase, the ghost of a lost territory. It's the physical echo of an instinct to explore, to climb, to travel over huge distances. And all of this leads to a super clear, really powerful recommendation. Step one is to observe. You have to understand that what you're seeing in the cage is just a shadow of their true wild nature. Step two, improve. Knowing this means we have to provide better, more stimulating environments, what's called enrichment, to help reduce their stress. But step three is the big one. Because you see, the best enrichment isn't a bigger cage or a new toy. It's the forest itself. Every single one of these behaviors, from the pacing to the foraging, points to one undeniable truth. The only way to protect the bear is to protect its home. The data from inside the cage is the strongest argument you can make for funding habitat protection out there. So through their quiet, daily routines, Siwa and Utu have told us exactly what they need, what their entire species needs to survive. They need space. They need a forest to call home. They've told us their story. The only question left is, are we actually listening?